Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatley Tones Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video and I hope you're all doing well. Now in today's video I'm going to be reviewing this book, the McCartney Legacy Volume 1 1969 to 1973 by authors Allan Kozinn and Adrian Sinclair. Yes, it is finally here in the UK. I've had this for about 10 days in book form after much delay. I know you guys all over the world have had this for several weeks now, but it has only just arrived in the UK in the last couple of weeks. All sorts of problems. I'm not sure exactly what they were. There was printing problems, or they didn't have enough paper to print it on. All those sort of lame excuses that we're kind of used to here in the UK when things don't quite go to plan. I didn't even get a delivery email from Amazon when it did turn up. You know, I had it on pre-order since March 2022, and it just turned up out the blue. Very much like the Paul McCartney 7-inch singles crate. We didn't know that was coming either. It just turned up, but I'm glad it is here now. Now, before I get into the review of the book, I just want to say a big welcome to the channel, to all the new subscribers. There's been quite a lot of you recently, so thank you so much for supporting the channel by subscribing. Really appreciate that, and I hope you enjoy the content on the channel. Now, back to the book. Now, when I heard that the book was going to be delayed, Amazon couldn't even give me a delivery date. They just said it was delayed and we'll tell you in the future. That wasn't enough for me because I've just been dying to get my hands on this book. So I ordered the audio book. So I've kind of had this book in one form or another since sort of mid to late December. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I haven't finished the book yet. I'm about 400 pages in. If you want to know what 400 pages looks like, it's there. That's the bit I've read. That's the bit that I haven't read yet. And I don't think that is going to be to the detriment of this review, because I'm not going to be talking about specific things that are in the text, because I don't want to give spoilers for those who haven't read it yet. But so I'm going to be talking about the book in much more general form as far as what's actually in the book, but I'm also going to be talking about the style in which it's written, which is quite important to the book, and a very interesting style it is too. And I'm also going to be talking about the value of this book to us as Beatles fans or Paul McCartney fans, because I think that is probably the most important aspect of this book. Now, another reason why I don't want to I'm doing this video now before I've finished it is because I don't want to rush the last 300 odd pages of the book, because I know that when I get to the end of this book I'm going to be really disappointed that it's finished, and that gives you a kind of an early clue of what I think of this book on the whole. I would have liked to have finished the book, but I've got a lot going on. I do have a full-time job. The channel takes up quite a lot of my spare time, and I've got a family, so I don't have a lot of time just to sit down and just read and do nothing else. But I am doing my best with it, and I will continue to read it, and maybe I'll do a more full of review when I do finish it. But I just don't want to rush that last bit. But I wanted to be able to read enough of this book to be able to give you a really good flavour, mainly for people who are deliberating about whether or not to buy the book. And I think I've read enough of this now to be able to do that, to give you a really good flavour and help you make the decision whether or not you want to buy it. You really want to buy it? So let's have a look at the book. The dust jacket has that on the front. Quite an unusual picture of Paul to choose for the front cover, I think, but quite engaging. That's it from the side. The back picture is Macca in action, which maybe might have made a better front cover, and that's how thick the book is. It is 672 pages long. That's the main body of the text, but then you've got all the credits. There's a discography, a videography, a bibliography, a list of all the concert dates, all the photo credits, and the acknowledgements for all the footnotes that are in the book. That takes the book up to about, well, exactly 713 pages. So it's a big old book. Couple of words about the authors. Allan Kozinn is an American, very experienced writer. Spent almost 40 years working for the New York Times. He's interviewed Paul McCartney lots of times, not specifically for this book. Paul was asked to take part, but he declined, or they didn't get an answer. I'm not sure which one it was, but obviously a very experienced writer. Adrian Sinclair is a British guy. I think he lives in Yorkshire, and he is a kind of a video editor, producer and writer. He's worked for the BBC, ITV, Sky, Channel 4, MTV, you name it, he's worked for it. So, first thing I want to talk about is the level of detail and research that has gone into this book. Now, if you've read any of Mark Lewison's books, expect the same kind of level of detail and research in this book. It is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it took about 6 or 7 years to write this book, and every story is well researched, and I believe that Adrian spent a lot of time with all the newspapers from around Britain in the British Library, researching these stories. There's interviews from lots of key players, you know, people like Denny Lane, Denny Sywell, Henry McCulloch, Glyn Johns, lots of people that were involved in the story. They were able to draw on the diaries of Denny Sywell's wife, Monique, and so that period is covered really well. Now, the book goes from 1969 to 1973, which for me is probably the most interesting period of Paul's career, because although it's not really, rags to riches would be the wrong sort of term, but what we're talking about here is, you know, a period of time where in the most part of that period, things were not going Paul's way. It kind of starts off with the breakup of the Beatles, and it covers McCartney and Ram, which were badly received by the critics, even though they sold well. We get the, you know, the formation of Wings and Wildlife, which wasn't received well either. And you know, Paul is not having it his own way in this book, and that's kind of what makes it really interesting. It's not until we get to the Band on the Run part where Paul has really, everything is now going in his favour, and I haven't actually read the Band on the Run part yet, but that's the kind of thing. So I'm really interested in this particular period, and we get so much detail. This is just 4 years of Paul's life, and normally when we get Beatles books, that cover the solo careers, we get, probably about this much is Beatles, and then this tiny bit at the end covers, 40 odd years of 4 solo Beatle careers. And to get this much detail about just 4 years of Paul's career is absolutely fantastic. And, one of the main benefits to us as fans about this book. So I want to talk about the writing style of the book, because it's a really interesting one, and one that I really like. It makes it very readable book because it doesn't linger on one subject for too long, because everything is written like a kind of diary, but not as a hardcore diary where you've got, March the 7th, blah, 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 March the 8th, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't work like that. So, for example, if they're in the recording studio, recording a track from Ram in the morning, and in the afternoon they go off and they have a meeting with, say, Lee Eastman or someone like that, then that is how the story is told. It's told in chronological order in real time. So things happen in the book as they happen in real life. So they make no distinction between Paul's professional career and his personal life. If something's to do with the recording, it's there, and if the next thing is something personal, then that is the next thing that you read. And I really like that about the book. Now you get a real deep feeling about how Paul feels during the period that is covered. You get a feeling of how hurt he was over the Beatles breakup, how much he absolutely loathed Alan Klein. You get a feeling of how disappointed and hurt he was that Ram, after he put so much effort into the recording of Ram, he was really disappointed with the reviews of that. Now, talking of the reviews, when an album has come out, immediately after the release of the album, you get like snippets from the reviews from the music papers at the time, which is really great to read. So it's really interesting to see how these albums were received at the time, because Ram has taken on a whole new persona these days, and is kind of lauded by a lot of fans as probably his best album. But back in the day when it actually came out, it was pretty much panned. And so it's really interesting to read all this stuff in real time as it happened. It's the same with song titles. So if a song title had a working title, like for example the song The Mess, for quite a long period it was called The Mess I'm In. That's what it was called when they did the university tour in 1972. It wasn't until they went to record it for Red Rose Speedway that they shortened the title to just The Mess. So when the song was actually called The Mess I'm In, that is what it's referred to in the book. The same with the Abbey Road Studios. Back in the days that we're talking about in this book, the Abbey Road Studios weren't called Abbey Road Studios, they were called the EMI Studios London. So that's what they are referred to in the book. So I just really like this mixing of Paul's professional career and his personal career. And boy, did he like to go on holiday. They know how to take a holiday, Paul and Linda. They seem to be jetting off here, there and everywhere throughout this book. But it's really great to read all this stuff in such detail. There's loads of interesting stuff in this book. You get to read the critique of John, George and Ringo on Paul's early albums. They obviously had their say on Paul's music. Any meetings between any of the former Beatles is well documented in the book, what was said, who was there. The court case is obviously well documented, and the meetings that the Beatles had while they were breaking up, all in the book. You get to learn how Wings was formed as a band, who was invited to join Paul and Linda in this band, who was invited and turned down the gig of being in Wings. All this sort of stuff is really fantastic that it's in the book. Now, although Adrian and Alan are clearly Paul McCartney fans, you'd have to be a fan to take on a project of this magnitude. It's a real sort of labour of love, I guess, if you want. But they don't do they whitewash over the story? No, they don't. They don't. Where Paul is shown in a bad light, they don't hide that away. That is all there in the book to read. Where when he has a hissy fit, things more important than having hissy fits, like where he was invited to play the concert for Bangladesh, and he decided not to because purely on the reason that Klein would take the credit for getting Beatles on the same stage together, and he wasn't going to hand Klein an easy win. And he was criticised for that because people were dying, and this was the fact that he'd be handing Klein an easy win is quite a minor thing. So that didn't show Paul in a good light, and that isn't shied away from in this book, which is another really good quality about the book. Now, I want to talk about the the recording sessions and how these are documented, because they are very, very thorough. And every recording session that Paul has taken up during this period is documented in this book. So you get to see, a page like that, where in this particular case it's a recording session. It gives you the date, what studio they recorded in, what song they recorded. In this case it was Luke from Red Rose Speedway, who's on the session, who plays what, everything you want to know, who produced it, everything that you need to know about the session is here, and that is for every single session that Paul was in a studio recording some music. So that is all really worth having. It's not that it hasn't been done before. Luca Parisi did it, Eight Arms to Hold You did it as well, but maybe not in the same level of detail. And I'd like to kind of cross-check this against Luca's book, because I remember when reading Luca's book, there were things that he wasn't sure about who played what on some songs, where he had a question mark in his text. It would be Jenny Solo tambourine question mark. So it'd be interesting to see how that cross-checks with the McCartney Legacy. So do I have anything negative to say about this book? Not really, not anything of any real consequence. Anyway, I've read that a few people have complained that the paper quality in the book is not that great, but for me, I think it's perfectly adequate. The pages are not going to fall out of the book. And listen, you can buy, this is a 700-page hardback book. You can go onto Amazon right now, pick this up for 25 quid or £12 for the paper version. And if the book had glossy pages and colour photos in it, then you'd probably be looking at 50 or 60 quid to buy this book, and people would complain about that and say it's too expensive. I'm not paying 50 or 60 quid for a book. So you have to make compromises, and it's much better to have this fantastic text rather than have it on glossy pages. So that's a compromise that they've made to keep the price down and sell more copies, and I think that is a worthwhile trade-off for me. If people hadn't have said that the paper quality was thin, it wouldn't have even been something that I would have picked up on my own. I think it's perfectly adequate. Now, generally, I have absolutely lapped up all the detail that this book has got to offer. But there was one bit where I thought, I don't really need to know this. And this is where they talk about the Columbia Studios in New York, where Paul recorded most of the Ram album, where they go back to about the 19th century and tell you all the different things that the building that the studios were in had been in a previous life before it became a recording studio. I thought, I don't really need to know that, but I'm talking about 3 or 4 lines of text that I read that I didn't really need to. The rest of it, I've absolutely loved the amount of depth and detail that they go into in this book. Now, like all books, all published books have got typos in it. There are 1 or 2 in this book. There is one glaring one where they talk about a Yoko concert in Cambridge on the 20th of March 1969, which was obviously the date that John and Yoko got married in Gibraltar, so they weren't in Cambridge doing a gig. But I consider that to be a typo as well, rather than a factual error, because the actual gig that Yoko did in Cambridge was on the 2nd of March 1969, not the 20th. So the 20th, basically they've got an erroneous 0 in there, and so I count that as a typo rather than a factual error. And obviously these things get proofread, but they don't get proofread by Beatles fans that would know when John and Yoko got married. They get proofread by people at HarperCollins, so they wouldn't know that, and that would have been missed. So it doesn't really matter. So is the McCartney Legacy the greatest book ever written about Paul McCartney? By a country mile, by 5 or 6 country miles, in my opinion. I mean, I've read hundreds of books about the Beatles, or about each one of the Beatles, and so have you. And to my mind, this is the best book about a Beatle that I've ever read. And I've said before, it's kind of Lewison type detail, but you know, the Beatles story has been retrod time and time and time again. And yes, he gives us lots of information that we haven't known, or he has in his early books so far. But we've never had a book about Paul that goes into this kind of detail, either about his life or about the recording process of his albums and singles and stuff. So this has got so much value for us as fans. I thank Allan Kozinn and Adrian Sinclair for taking on this project. It's a massive project, and this is of real value to fans of Paul McCartney. I absolutely love the book. If I'm giving it a rating, I'm giving it 10 out of 10, no question about that. So, if you are deliberating about buying this and you want to know about Paul McCartney's life in great detail, then what are you thinking about? Just go out and get it. So 25 quid for the hardback book, £12 for the paperback book. You know, what are you even thinking about? Absolutely fantastic book. The good news is that the story doesn't end here. There's more to come from the McCartney Legacy. Volume 2 is well underway and due out in 2024. That is going to cover the period 1974 to 1980. So I guess it's probably going to go up to John Lennon's murder. There should probably be another 2 volumes to follow to cover the rest of his career. So that gives us something to really look forward to. Now, if you've read the McCartney Legacy Volume 1, please tell me about it down in the comments. Tell me your thoughts on the book. I'd love to hear what you think of the book as well. As you know, I read all your comments and I respond to all your comments as well. If you guys want to do me a really big favour, please give the video a thumbs up or leave a comment, or do both those things if you like, because those 2 things help with the YouTube algorithm, help my videos get out to more people and help me grow the channel. If you're seeing this channel for the first time and you fancy getting involved, please consider subscribing to the channel and supporting it that way. I'd really appreciate that and love to have you on board. Okay, well, that is it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye bye.